This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heilar.
Hi, I'm Seth.
And I'm Patrick.
Chapter 42. Before the arrow. And our symbol is the die. The dice? The inside of a tent roof had to be the most boring sight in the world, but lying back in his shirt sleeves on scarlet tasseled cushions that Melindra had acquired, Matt studied the gray-brown cloth intently, or rather, he stared beyond it. One arm curled behind his head, he swirled a hammered silver goblet full of good wine from the south of Cairien. A small cask had cost him as much as 2 good horses would, as much as 2 good horses would have if the world and everything in it had not been stood on its head, but he counted it a small price for something decent. Sometimes a drop or two splashed over onto his hand, but he never noticed, and he never took a drink. By his book, matters had long since gone beyond merely serious. Serious was being stuck in the waste with no idea of the way out. Serious was dark friends popping up when you least expected, Trolloc attacks in the night, the odd Murdral freezing your blood with an eyeless stare. That sort of thing came quickly, and usually was done before you had much chance to think. It was certainly not what you would seek out. Yet, if you had to, you could live with it, if you could live through it. But for days he had known where they were heading, and why. Nothing quick about it. Days to think. I'm no bloody hero, he thought grimly, and I'm no bloody soldier. Fiercely, he pushed down a memory of walking fortress walls, ordering his last reserves to where another crop of Trollocs scaling ladders had sprung up. That was not me. The light burn whoever it was. He did not know what he was. A sour thought. But whatever he was, it involved gambling, and taverns, women, and dancing. That he was sure of. It involved a good horse and every road in the world to choose from. Not sitting and waiting for somebody to shoot arrows at him, or try to stick a sword or a spear through his ribs. Any different would make him a fool, and he would not be that. Not for Rand, or Moraine, or anybody else. As he sat up, the silver fox-head medallion, hanging on its leather thong, slipped from the unlaced neck of his shirt. He tucked it back before taking a long swallow of wine. The medallion made him safe from Moraine, or any other Aes Sedai, as long as they did not get it away from him. Surely, one or another would try sooner or later, but nothing except his own wits kept him safe from some fool killing him, along with a few thousand other fools, or from Rand, or from being Ta'veren. A man ought to be able to find a profit in something like that, having events twist themselves around him. Rand certainly had, in a way. He himself had never noticed anything twisting around him except the fall of dice. He would not turn away from some of the things that had happened to Ta'veren in stories. Wealth and fame dropped into their pockets as if from the sky. Men who wanted to kill them decided to follow instead, and women with ice in their eyes decided to melt. Not that he was complaining at what he had, really, and certainly not that he wanted anything like Rand's bargain. The price to get into the game was too high. It was just that he seemed to be stuck with all the burdens of being Ta'veren, and none of the pleasure. "It's time to go," he told the empty tent, then paused thoughtfully and sipped at the goblet. "It is time to get on Pips and ride. Ride to Camelin, maybe. Not a bad city, so long as he avoided the royal palace. Or Lugard. He had heard rumors about Lugard. A fine place, that, for the likes of him. Time to leave Rand in my dust. He's got a bloody Aiel army and more maidens than he can count taking care of him. He doesn't need me." That last was not strictly true. In some strange way he was tied to Rand's success or failure in Tarmangaiden. Him and Perrin both. 3 Ta'veren all tangled together. The histories would probably only mention Rand. Small chance he or Perrin would find any place in the stories. And then there was the Horn of Valir, which he did not want to think about, and would not until he had to. There might be some way out of that particular mess yet. Any way he looked at it, the Horn was a problem for another day. A distant day. With luck, all those bills would come due on a very distant day. Only that might take more luck than he had. The point now was that he had said all of that about going and felt scarcely a twinge. Not long ago, he had been unable to even speak of leaving. When he got too far from Rand, he had been drawn back like a hooked fish on some invisible line. Then he had become able to say it, even to lay plans. But the slightest thing would distract him. make him put off his schemes for stealing away. Even in Ruidian, when he had told Rand he was going, he had been sure something would get in the way. It had, in a manner of speaking. Matt had made it out of the waste, but he was no further from Rand than before. This time, he did not think he would be diverted. Not like I was abandoning him, he muttered. If he can't bloody take care of himself by now, he'll never be able to. I'm not his bloody nursemaid. And then he turns the goblet upside down and drinks the entire thing. Starts marching towards Rand's tent. It's like, that's it. I'm leaving.
I like in the beginning, he's sitting there with the wine, the most expensive wine he can possibly buy, and just letting it drip over his hand and not drinking it.
Yeah.
This is the most expensive wine out there that I'm not drinking.
Just holding it and staring into space.
Yeah.
Gotta get out of here. I've gotta get out of here. Then he slugs it and starts marching towards Rand's tent.
I've had those nights at a bar. What the fuck am I doing with my life? You just sit there for like an hour looking at your beer, and then you're like, all right, chugging this. I got shit to do. Is this the first time he says, I am no bloody hero? I couldn't remember if we had an earlier example of it.
I want to say maybe in The Stone. Like, as he's rushing in to be a hero.
No, yeah, right. As he's about to do here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No bloody hero, I'm getting out of here.
Yeah. Well, anyway, ding, catchphrase.
Yeah.
Oh, he's never gotten anything from being Ta'Viren. Ta'Viren have wealth fall in their hands. Look at all this wealth I have.
Yeah.
No luck whatsoever. He hasn't, like, had himself saved in battle by, like, remember that time where he put the staff over his shoulder and it knocked the dude in the head, saving his life?
Yep.
Yep. No, this is the case of, like, always wanting more. It's like, yeah, I mean, I've got a good job and some benefits and a nice house and a nice wife, but it's not that big of a house and it's not that good of a job. You know, and this is him doing the same thing, being like, ugh, my Ta'Virenness just isn't as good as Rand or Perrin's.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to say about that. I guess we all compare ourselves to each other all the time, but Matt starts walking, and he kind of observes what the camp looks like. There's not too much to talk about here. The Aiel tents blend in with the brown hills really well, Matt kind of notes. Rand's tent is at the top of what I'm imagining is basically a barren hill, and around the bottom of it are the maidens, and interspersed in the maidens' tents, for some reason, are the wise ones, have put themselves in the maidens' camp.
Well, they want to be near Rand.
Yeah.
We get another quote, the summer was hanging on too long to suit him, so we've reached sort of, we're not really into winter yet, but maybe early fall, and it's still like summer hot. So things are starting to really become odd.
Yeah.
It's not just a hot summer anymore.
And we get the same kind of, we've talked about this before, where, you know, a character like Matt is like, you know, I don't know what the weather's supposed to be like on this side of the world, but I would have figured at this time of the year it would be a bit cool. It is the fall, but it's still blazing hot.
And they've been used to being in the Waste, where it is hotter, because it's basically a desert, so...
Yeah. He's like bummed he came out the other side of the mountains, and it's still hot.
It's still hot, but it's cooler than it was, so it's like, wait, is it just... What's going on? It does make for some oddness, because it does feel cooler here than it did the Waste.
Yeah. Bringing it back to what we were talking about just a second ago, I'll read this little line. There were only a few of the wise ones to be seen, yet they made up for lack of numbers with stares that followed him. And Matt goes on about it for the rest of the paragraph, that, like, as he's walking up to Rand's tent, everybody around is, like, looking at him and observing him really closely. We were talking about, I kind of said, like, I don't know why the wise ones have put themselves in the maidens' camp. That seems unusual. Possibly to be close to Rand, but also we know that right now Sulin is conspiring with Sorlea, Amis, and Melaine to kind of corral Rand, to keep him out of the battle, but also to start making him use the maidens.
Sure, yeah, because right now the maidens are pissed, because what he wants to do is, and we'll see it here in a minute, but basically have the girls fight from the tower that he built, have the maidens protect them, and then have himself go out and wander in the battle so he can run into Couladin.
Yeah.
And he wants to leave the maidens and the channelers behind. Which, he ends up being up there, and that he makes himself a target, which is a whole nother issue that we'll get if that happens. But yeah, maybe a immovable tower standing in one place for hours, very visible to your enemies, may not be the best strategy.
To be fair, though, it is. I mean, that wasn't what he was intending to do. He just gets roped in to following along.
It's what he intended the girls to do, and they would have been just as much a target.
That's true. Matt walks into the tent, and there's nobody there.
I do like that he noticed that Moraine may have gotten the upper hand on Rand by just doing everything he says. He's like, I'm not so sure that didn't give her the upper hand. I'm not sure how, but...
Yeah. I mean, if she wanted to be near him all the time.
So yeah, then he walks up in, and as far as what we know is that Rand and Lan were standing together and watched him go into the tent, and Rand said, hey Lan, go see what he can figure out about the map.
Yeah, go see what he says if you just start kind of casually talking about it.
Talking about battle. I just want to point out one thing. The reason that Jason Natale's clothes always look freshly laundered is he uses the power to keep himself totally clean.
Yes.
He can't do much, but he is always spotless.
But yeah, Matt notices that he's like, couldn't like the man. He's too clean and he doesn't sweat. It's unnatural. And I highlighted both of those. I was like, how is it that Matt's the only one that noticed? Well, he probably didn't. I think that Moraine suspects at the very least.
Oh, Moraine absolutely knows. I think she's already referenced it, and she definitely references it in the letter that she writes him.
Yeah.
So there's no doubt in my head that I think she figured it out almost immediately. I'd guess within days of Natale showing up, if not sooner. After Rand captures him, not when Natale's traveling.
So Matt walks in. The only person in the tent is Natale Asmodean, who Matt doesn't like. Natale says some, surly, weird things, and Matt just kind of ignores him.
They have an interesting history because they both have old memories, but from different times, right? Because Natale's memories end at the breaking, and then Matt's old memories don't start until maybe 500 years after that.
Right.
So that's why Natale's always playing old songs that Matt doesn't always recognize.
Yeah.
Even though Matt recognizes a lot of old songs.
If he was going to stay and ignore Natale's searching look at the same time, there was nothing for it but to study the maps. With the toe of his boot, he shifted a few pebbles on the map of the city so he could read what was written on the parchments. In spite of himself, he winced. If the Aiel scouts could count, Couladin had nearly 160,000 spears, Shaido, and those who had supposedly gone to join their societies among the Shaido, a hard nut to crack, and prickly. This side of the spine of the world had not seen an army like that since Arthur Hawkwing's time. The second map showed the other clans that had crossed the Dragon Wall. All had now, in one force or another, strung out according to when they had left the Jangai and spread apart, but too close to here for comfort. The Shiand, the Kadara, the Dareen, and the Miagoma. Between them, they apparently had at least as many spears as Couladin. They had not left many behind, if that was true. The 7 clans with Rand almost doubled that, easily enough to face Couladin, or the 4 clans, either or, not both, not at once, but both at once might be what Rand had to fight. What the Aiel called the bleakness had to be affecting those clans too. Every day, still, men tossed down their weapons and vanished, but only a fool would think it lessened their numbers any more than it did Rand's, and there was always the possibility that some of those were going to Couladin. The Aiel did not speak of it very much, or very freely, and masked the idea behind talk of joining societies. But even now, men and maidens decided they could not accept Rand, or what he had told them of themselves. Every morning some were missing, and not all left their spears behind. A pretty situation, wouldn't you say? Matt's head jerked up at Lan's voice, but the warder had entered the tent alone. Just something to look at while I waited. Is Rand coming back? He will be with us soon. Thumbs tucked behind his sword belt, Lan stood beside Matt, looking down at the map. His face gave away as much as a statue's would. Tomorrow should bring the largest battle since Arthur Hawkwing. You don't say, Matt responds. He just had the same thought. Does not want to talk about it. I figured I'd cut that there, but as Matt breaks into his battle plans, I wanted to just read it. And this is a long, long chapter anyway, so.
So basically, the important stuff I had there was just the numbers. That you have 160,000 Shido gathered around the city, another 160 unaffiliated Aiel in the 4 clans, and then you have the remaining, I want to say, 5 clans?
That Rand currently
With
has.
Rand?
I think that's correct. I
Yeah.
think it's 5 right now. I think basically Matt's making the point that Rand's numbers are about as much as everybody else. Couladin's group and the 4 clans that are kind of strung out behind them, who have been following Rand's group but not joining it, which is concerning because nobody knows what they're going to do. And if they decide to attack Rand while he's attacking Couladin, then Rand's surrounded by roughly his same number. That's a problem.
So that sort of gives me the idea the Rand has somewhere around 300,000 troops.
Roughly, yeah.
And then when the rest of the 4 clans come to him, he ends up with somewhere around 400,000 troops, counting some losses in battle.
Sounds about right.
So yeah, I'm guessing after this battle, Rand has somewhere around 400,000 Aiel under him.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a lot. That's nearly 500,000.
Matt asks about this other group, the 4, what we're calling unaffiliated clans who haven't picked their side yet. And Lan responds basically, I don't know, Ruark doesn't know, and if the wise ones do, they're not telling us, so yeah, it's a gamble.
Oh yeah, this is one of the character scene setting moments for Matt. This is what sets him up to be the general in the last battle. Super important.
Matt shifted uncomfortably and took a half step toward the entrance. No, he would wait. Fastening his gaze on the maps, he pretended to study them further. Perhaps Lan would leave him in silence. He just wanted to say his piece to Rand and go. The warder appeared to want to talk, though. What do you think, Master Gleeman? Should we rush down on Couladin with everything and crush him tomorrow? That sounds as good to me as any other plan, Natail replied dourly. Emptying the goblet down his throat, he dropped it on the carpets and picked up the harp to begin softly strumming something dark and funereal. I lead no armies, warder. I command nothing, save myself, and not always that, Matt grunted, and Lan glanced at him before returning to his study of the maps. You do not think it a good plan? Why not? He said it so casually that Matt answered without thinking. Well, 2 reasons. If you surround Couladin, trap him between you and the city, you might crush him against it. How long was Rand going to be? But you might push him right over the walls, too. From what I hear, he's nearly gotten over twice already, even without miners or siege engines, and the city is hanging on by its teeth. Say his piece and go. That was it. Press him enough, and you'll find yourself fighting inside Cairhien. Nasty thing, fighting in a city, and the idea is to save the place, not finish ruining it. Those slips laid out on the maps themselves, made it all so clear. Frowning, he squatted with his elbows on his knees. Lan got down with him, but he hardly noticed. A dicey problem, and fascinating. Best if you try to shove him away. Hit him from the south mainly. He pointed to the river Galen. It joined the Alguenya some miles north of the city. There are bridges up here. Leave the Shido a clear path to them. Always leave a way out, unless you really want to find out how hard a man can fight when he's nothing to lose. His finger slid east. Wooded hills for the most part, it seemed. Probably not much different from right around here. A blocking force here, on this side of the river, will make sure they go for the bridges, if it's big enough, and positioned right. Once they're moving, Couladin won't want to try fighting someone ahead of him while you're coming from behind. Yes, almost exactly the same as Genji. Not unless he's a complete fool, anyway. They make it to the river in good order, but those bridges will choke them. I don't see Aiel swimming or hunting out fords, for that matter. Keep the pressure on, shove them across. With luck, you'll be able to harry them all the way to the mountains. It was like Kuandig fords, too, late in the Trolloc Wars, and on much the same scale. Not much different from Torreshan, either, or Sulmain Gap, before Hawkwing found his stride. The names flickered through his head. The images of bloody fields forgotten even by historians. Absorbed in the map as he was, they did not register as anything but his own remembrances. Too bad you don't have more cavalry. Light cavalry is best for the harrying. Bite at the flanks, keep them running, and never let them settle to fight. But Aiel should do almost as well. And the other reason? Lan asked quietly. Matt was caught up in it now. He more than merely liked gambling, and battle was a gamble to make dicing in taverns a thing for children and toothless invalids. Lives were the stake here. Your own and other men's. Men who were not even there. Make the wrong wager? A foolish bet? Cities died. Whole nations. Natail's somber music was fit accompaniment. At the same time, this was a game that set blood racing. Without lifting his eyes from the map, he snorted. You know as well as I. If even one of those 4 clans decides to side with Couladin, they'll take you from behind while your hands are still full of Shaido. Couladin will be the anvil, and they the hammer, with you the nut between. Only take half of what you have against Couladin. That makes it an even fight, but you'll have to settle for it. There was no such thing as fairness in war. You took your enemy from behind, when he least expected it, when and where he was weakest. You still have an edge. He has to worry about a sortie from the city. The other half, you split in 3 parts. 1 to funnel Couladin to the river, the other 2 a few miles apart, between the city and the 4 clans. Very neat, Lan said, nodding. That slab-carved face never changed, but approval touched his voice, if lightly. It would gain a clan nothing to attack either force, especially not when the other could take it in the rear, and none will try to interfere in what happens around the city for the same reason. Of course, all 4 could join. Not likely, if they haven't already, but if they do, everything changes. Matt laughed aloud. Everything always changes. The best plan lasts until the first arrow leaves the bow. This would be easy enough for a child to handle, except for Indirian and the rest not knowing their own minds. If they all decide to go over to Couladin, you toss the dice and hope, because the Dark One's in the game for sure. At least you'll have enough strength clear of the city, nearly to match them, enough to hold them for the time you need. Abandon the idea of pursuing Couladin, and turn everything on them as soon as he's well and truly begun crossing the Galen. But it's my bet they'll wait and watch, and come to you once Couladin is done for. Victory settles a lot of arguments in most men's head. The music had stopped. Matt glanced at Natail, and found the man holding his harp rigidly, staring at him over it harder than ever, staring as if he had never seen him before, did not know what he was. The gleeman's eyes were dark, polished glass, his knuckles white on the harp's gilding. With that, it all crashed home. What he had been saying, the memories he had been embracing. Burn you for a fool for not guarding your tongue. Why had Lan had to take the conversation that way? Why could he not have talked about horses or the weather or just kept his mouth shut? The warder had never seemed all that eager to talk before. Usually the man made a tree seem talkative. Of course, he could have kept his own mind focused and his own mouth shut, too. At least he had not been babbling in the old tongue. Blood and ashes, I hope I wasn't. Springing to his feet, Matt turned to go, and found Rand standing just inside the tent, absently twisting that odd bit of tasseled spear as if he did not realize he was holding it. How long had he been there? It did not matter. Matt spilled it all out in a rush. I'm leaving, Rand. Come first light in the morning. I am in the saddle and gone. I'd go this minute if I could get far enough in half a day to suit me for stopping. I mean to put as many miles between me and the Aiel, any Aiel, as Pips can cover before I make camp. No point in bedding down close enough to be snapped up and hung out to dry by somebody's scouts. Couladin must have them out too, and even the others might not recognize him before he had a spear in his liver. I will be sorry to see you go, Rand said quietly. Don't try to talk me out of... Matt blinked. That's it? You'll be sorry to see me go? I've never tried to make you stay, Matt. Perrin went when he had to, and so can you. Matt opened his mouth, then closed it again. Rand had never tried to make him stay. True, he had just done it, without trying.
Victory settles a lot of arguments in most men's heads. That one in particular. Such a good line.
A little bit after the read, too, I really liked, although I didn't include it. This isn't for me, Rand. I don't know anything about battles, and I don't want to know. He avoided looking at Lan and Natail. If either man cracked his teeth, he would punch him right in the mouth, even the warder. I don't know anything.
Making out to be a liar. As I said, it's like watching a monkey do calculus.
Wait, I thought you were the drunk kid.
Yeah. Also, I love the way Jordan is able to lay out the strategy for the whole battle and tell you exactly what's going to be happening, while at the same time giving you all this information about Matt.
Yeah.
And I love the dual purposes of this scene. This is one of those masterful scenes, really three purposes, because it also shows you how devious Rand has become. Because even though Matt is thinking all this stuff about battle, Rand tricks him into revealing it.
There's a lot of layers, yeah. And I had actually forgotten that while I was reading this chapter today. It's been a while since I read this section. That Lan shows up as if he's just kind of waiting for everyone else to show up, and casually asks Natail what he thinks of the battle. Who cares what Natail? Nobody cares what Natail thinks is the answer. No. That's not the point. The point is to start the conversation, but not directly with Matt, so that he doesn't think that that's the point.
And give like a stupid answer, so it's like, no, that's a dumb thing to do. Oh, really? Why? What is the rule on the internet? The best way on the internet to get a correct answer is not to ask a question. It's to assert an incorrect answer, and then people will correct you.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's exactly what Lan did to Matt right there. He was like, so we should just charge on in, right? That's a good idea. No, you idiot! There's an interesting conversation here between the boys after Rand walks in and sort of sees the end of the battle plan.
Uh-huh.
And just the conversation about Egwene, that I'm no longer certain how much of what I tell her I might as well be telling Moraine or the Wise Ones or both. I reached that conclusion a long time ago. She's left Emond's Field further behind than either of us, and regrets it less. And I absolutely think that is them just totally not perceiving the homesickness.
She feels it too, but I thought it was correct, and it felt right to me in some ways. At least that Egwene seems to regret it less than the boys do. Not that they're not finding some enjoyment out there in the world. I just feel that Egwene is more driven. She seems to have a purpose in a way that, like, Matt doesn't. You know what I mean?
I just feel like they take that as like, oh, because you wanted to leave, you've betrayed Emond's Field. And I feel like that is taking it too far, right? And saying, like, just because you've embraced this new life, we can't trust you anymore. That seems crazy to me.
Yeah.
And I don't think that everything she knows goes to Moraine at all.
A lot doesn't. Egwene has a lot of secrets.
Yeah, her own especially. And Moraine's off doing her own thing. She's worried about Rand. She really could care less about Egwene. And frankly, she's so obsessed with Rand at this point, she doesn't really care what Matt's doing either. She knows she has so little time left. She's like, Matt, go do your thing. I got to deal with Rand. I'm going to just stick to him like,
White on rice?
Thank you, yes.
There's a lot of different ways to say that.
A stink on shit, I think, is the way my dad used to say it. So
That's another one.
Gonna go there, yeah.
I guess the more that I'm thinking about this quote, the more I want to say... So I feel like Matt legit doesn't know. Like, he doesn't have a kind of mental direction in the way that Egwene does, because... Right, Egwene has decided that this whole thing matters, and so she needs to be a part of it. If she believes it matters, she has to help. That comes in various forms. One is learning, and there's a lot to it. But Rand, is also driven and focused. He understands his purpose, but he doesn't believe he has any way out. So I think that the real difference is between Rand and Egwene, at least in this regard, is that Egwene is making more of a choice she's decided that she's getting involved, that she's going to learn everything that she needs to help in the last battle and organizing everything and making sure this goes well. Whereas Rand is kind of pushed along and doesn't even believe he has a choice. He hasn't consciously made that choice.
I feel like at this point he has, right? Once he committed to the Aiel and made that plan, feel like he set himself on the path to being a king. And, like, yes, I believe he didn't feel like he had a choice.
Yeah.
But he's no longer resisting. He's walking into it, eyes open.
Yeah, it's the difference between believing you have no way out and putting yourself in a situation where you have no way out on purpose.
Well, when there's a trap getting into to go, that's what the girls are for.
Not that Rand doesn't spring plenty of traps on purpose.
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, the whole freaking Stone of Tyr was like the massive trap.
Yeah, and
what he does at the end of this book, he jumps right into Ravine's trap. It kills Avienda.
And then Ilian as well.
Ilian as well, yeah. No, I mean, he loves jumping into traps. He's just usually a big enough, powerful enough bull that he just tears them apart. Whereas the girls tend to spring them and then, like, take them apart from the inside.
Yeah. Does Rand just gateways into it and blows the lid off the whole thing? Yeah. The difference between a knife in the dark and a bazooka and at noon. They'll both kill you. One's thoughtful and the other's spectacular. It's different. I gave myself one more thing to read. Rand and Lan talking after Matt leaves. Matt walks out of the tent.
There's one thing I want to say before he does that. As Matt walks out of the tent, he sees the Terrans there,
and
he's like, never see any of them again. Most of them end up in the band.
See him in a couple hours, buddy.
Yeah. And they'll be, your personal army for the rest of the last battle.
Oh, also, I highlighted, leaving tomorrow at last. The dice seemed to be spinning in his head, and there was no knowing what pips would show when they landed.
Oh.
Which I took for fairly literal. Whenever I hear the dice seem to be rolling, I just assume that it's, the dice, not just figurative.
This is the actual dice in his head. I missed that. Have we seen the dice in his head before?
Yeah.
We've seen him be lucky. But I feel like that wasn't like the warning dice in his head. We didn't have this like warning rattling going off that he's like waiting for something to happen.
I think later in the series it's a lot more obvious.
It's a lot more he's like constantly talking about how like he can hear the dice and he's waiting for him to fall and this is different thing. But here he's like, odd that.
Yeah.
The dice in his head.
It literally thinks that.
It's like he thinks it's like women problems.
The dice.
It's like, oh, it must be Melindra.
Yeah.
I don't think he heard them in Tarvalin. I don't think that the bridge, he like sensed his luck, but he was like, it's time to roll the dice, but he didn't hear the dice. There was nothing rattling in his head.
Yeah, but Pookie, that's what I was thinking too. When we say the lucky night, we mean when Matt's trying to leave Tarvalin. They fall off the top of a building and he lands on top of the guy and the knife so that the knife is pointed down, like the luckiest possible things keep happening to him. That may be the first time. I thought that might have been... And then what about in Tyr? Anything in Tyr? Like at the battle for the stone? With the fireworks and stuff? I don't remember clearly.
Oh, I do remember it when he was breaking into Tyr. That's right. I don't think it was Tarvalin, but I do think they were started in Tyr.
In any case, Matt says his piece and walks out, thinking about Melindra and how he's going to leave without upsetting her, or if that's even possible.
Dark friend alert. I don't think that's relevant in these couple of chapters. We do see her stalk off, and I want to talk about that a little bit, but
yeah,
I think it's more just because she's a maiden.
Rand stood staring after Matt long after the tent flaps had fallen to hide him. I only heard the last bit, he said finally. Was it all like that? Very nearly, Lan replied. With only a few minutes to study the maps, he laid out close to the battle plan that Ruark and the others made. He saw the difficulties and the dangers and how to meet them. He knows about miners and siege engines and using light cavalry to harry a defeated foe. Rand looked at him. The warder showed no surprise, not the twitch of an eyelash. Of course, he was the one who had said Matt seemed surprisingly knowledgeable about military matters, and Lan was not going to ask the obvious question either, which was good. Rand had no right to give the little answer he had. He could have asked a few questions himself, such as, what did miners have to do with battles? Or maybe it was only sieges. Whatever the answer, there is not a mine closer than Kinslayer's dagger, and no certainty anyone was still digging ore. Well, this battle would be fought without. The important thing was that he knew Matt had gained more on the other side of that doorway to Rangriel than a tendency to spout the old tongue when not thinking, and knowing that, Rand would surely make use of it. You don't have to get any harder, he thought bitterly. He had seen Matt climbing toward his tent, and never hesitated in sending Lan to discover what might come to the surface in idle conversation, alone. That had been deliberate. The rest might or might not be, but it would happen. He hoped Matt had a fine time while he was free. He hoped that Perrin was enjoying himself in the Two Rivers, showing off Fail to his mother and sisters, maybe marrying her. He hoped it, because he knew he would draw them back. Ta'Veren pulling at Ta'Veren, and he the strongest. Moraine had named it no coincidence. 3 such growing up in the same village, all nearly the same age. The wheel wove happenstance and coincidence into the pattern, but it did not lay down the likes of the 3 of them for no reason. Eventually, he would pull his friends back to him, however far they went, and when they came, he would use them, however he could, however he had to, because he did have to, because whatever the prophecy of the dragons said, he was sure the only chance he had of winning Tarmangaiden lay in having all 3 of them. 3 Ta'Veren, who had been tied together since infancy, tied together once more. No, he did not need to become hard. You're rank enough already to make a Shan-Chan spew his supper. Play March of Death, he commanded, in a harsher voice than he wanted. I had to include that.
The March of Death?
Yeah, it's just so good. He has all these kind of dark, calculating thoughts, and then he turns to Natail. He's like, play March of Death, and then he invites everyone in. And all his generals walk into, like, the super sad music. Rand brooding.
This is really Rand going full king general, like, thousands of people are going to die tomorrow on him for his power. You notice Lan makes a formal bow.
Yeah, I'd be feeling a little dark, too. I mean...
Yeah. Lan's like, damn, this dude's a king now. Like, I really feel, because he's about to lose Moraine, this is his final step to becoming an adult. I don't know, in his growing up, right? I really do feel that sort of the loss of Moraine, the loss of the parent figure, is the final step in him becoming the hero king.
You're alone now.
And you really see here that, like, he has stepped up to that level where even Lan is treating him at that level. This is a good point, that this is really his first command of an army. He's led men before. He's had skirmishes, maybe?
And also, like, with Trollocs, I don't want to downplay the probable mental burden of having to fight Trollocs and Murdral all the time, but at least they're literally monsters.
Right. There's no guilt for killing a Trolloc.
Yeah.
And he led in the stone during the battle and fought that. There was a couple of fights there. His camps have been attacked a couple of times, but he's always been like, I get to sit up here and do nothing while everybody else fights. So this is really the first time he's leading people against people.
And that's all not to mention, and Rand kind of counts this off in his head at some point, I can't remember, it's at the end of this chapter or the beginning of the next, doesn't matter, that for the last, like, several weeks, Rand has been marching from town to town where, like, every last man, woman, and child has been slaughtered, hung from the walls, like rows of heads on pikes of men, women, and children, lining his path toward Couladin. It's not exactly like I can
not the yellow brick
maybe
road,
a little bit understand
that
it's messing with his head a little, that he's going to a dark place. This has been his landscape. Death and blood and, murdered children in the streets that's what he's been doing for the last couple of weeks. Just walking past that.
Also, he's been practicing a lot with the One Power, and I just want to point out that he's probably been absorbing a fair amount of taint lately. Just going to preface that for the next chapter.
Yes.
just keep that in mind.
Ooh, another big thing of Darth Rand, King Rand. Shortly after that read, play March of Death, he commanded, in voice harsher than he wanted. He kind of looks around, has some thoughts, and he says, Lan, would you ask the others to come in now? The warder made a formal bow before stepping outside. It was the first time that he had ever done that, but Rand noticed only absently. The battle would begin tomorrow. It's just perfect. Land's a king, by the way. He may not have a kingdom, but,
Sure.
you know, if he just showed up at various courts, he would be treated like a king. And now he's telling the Dragon Reborn's generals when to come in or out.
And you notice Weramon, who's just pissed off because he's got orders to sabotage this thing and nothing is going his way. He is a dark friend extraordinaire, and he is doing everything he can to cause the battle Rand's forces to lose.
Where is Weramon?
He comes in the tent here in a second. He's part of that group.
Oh, I mean, I guess in the next chapter, we hear when Matt is talking to Weiramon's lieutenants, I'll call them.
Sure.
Weiramon's not there with them. And Matt says,
No, he sure
where the hell's Weiramon? And they're like, the Lord Dragon sent him back to Tyr to handle the rebels here and there and that, this and that and the other thing. Is that true? I don't actually remember.
I highly doubt it. I bet it's... I haven't looked it up, but I bet it's Weiramon's lie to get out of the battle. He sent these troops in there with no scouts, no proper defense, expect them to die.
Right toward a trap, which made me wonder if Weiramon knew that there was a trap there, or he just sent them in unprepared and hoping they would be trapped. Either way.
And yeah, I wonder, it's always a question how much of Weiramon actually is just an idiot and how much he's a dark friend covering up being evil by pretending to be incompetent.
Right.
Because he is an idiot. Like, there's no doubt about that. Like, he's a pompous asshole, idiot, buffoon. Because even his dark friend plots never go according to plan. Stupid or malicious? It turns out he's both.
Probably both, yeah. With the funeral dirge playing, the chiefs filed in no particular order. This time, Derek came first. Ruark and Aram together at the rear with Lan. Bruan and Jaren took places next to Rand. They did not concern themselves with precedence among themselves, and Einallen they seemed to take as all but one of them. Weiramon entered last, his lordlings at his heels, and a tight-mouthed scowl on his face. Precedence certainly mattered to him. Muttering into his oiled beard, he stalked his way around the fire pit, taking up a place behind Rand, until the chief's flat stares finally broke through his shell, at least. Among Aiel, a close kinsman or society brother might position himself so, if there was the possibility of a knife in the back. He still frowned at Jaren and Derek, as though expecting one of them to make room. Finally, Bael gestured to a place beside him, across the maps from Rand, and after a pause, Weiramon strode back to sit cross-legged and rigid, staring straight ahead, and looking like a man who had swallowed an unripe plum whole. The younger Terran stood almost as stiffly at his back, one with the grace to look embarrassed. Rand took note of him, but said not a word, only thumbed his pipe full of tabac, and seized Saidin long enough to light it. He had to do something about Weiramon. The man exacerbated old problems and made new ones. Not a flicker crossed Ruark's features, but the other chief's expressions ranged from Han's sour disgust to Aram's clear, cold-eyed readiness to dance the spears there and then. Perhaps there was a way for Rand to rid himself of Weiramon and make a beginning on another of his worries at the same time. With Rand's example, Lan and the chiefs began filling pipes. "I see only small changes necessary," Bael said, puffing his pipe alight and sparking a glower from Han, as usual. "Do these small changes concern the Goshen, or perhaps some other clan?" Putting Weiramon from his mind, Rand bent himself to listening, as they worked out what had to be altered from their new view of the terrain. Now and again, one of the Aiel would glance at Natail, a brief tightness to eyes or mouth suggesting that the mournful music plucked at something in him. Even the Terrans grimaced sadly. The sounds washed over Rand, though, touching nothing. Tears were a luxury he could no longer afford, not even inside. Dark. Dark.
Things are about to get bad. I've always said, I feel that Fires of Heaven into Demise Wells really is the return of the Empire. The Dark One rises. The corruption of Rand. The descent of Rand. I mean, we're really sort of starting on that path to him being capable of destroying the world.
Yeah, and at this point, Ren starts making some really notable successes, like with this siege of Kairian, if you can call it that. That's not really quite what it is. And, yeah, the Empire Strikes Back. Ooh, super excited about Picard. I watched his interview. Of course I am. I watched his interview on Colbert this morning. Yeah.
That was exciting. Of course, you know how much I love pit bulls.
Oh, yeah. I almost forgot to bring it up.
I feel like he rescued one a couple of years ago and fell in love with the breed and has, like, rescued a couple since. And that's why he, like, so I know he lives with a pit, and so he demanded to have one in the show.
Yeah.
And, yeah. No, he's my hero on many, many levels. Like, honestly, the people of Star Trek have gone on to be some of the best people, actors, and just generally, like, role models than almost any other show that's out there. And that makes so much sense now looking back on what Star Trek was. If you like listen to podcasts, and you do, and you're nerdy, and you are, go download The Nod, and they have it's called The Nod, and they have an episode where they interview LeVar Burton. It's on Gimlet Media. And they're basically, you know, it's a podcast about Black culture, and they sit down and talk to LeVar Burton about how important his role was on TV to them as a kid. And then they just fucking hang out for like an hour, and it's just like, it sounds like the most fun, because you can just hear the reverence for LeVar Burton in these two people's voices.
Oh, yeah. I feel like that's like a Dana Scully situation where like a whole generation of young women were like, well, I can be a scientist. Dana Scully's the best scientist. So you need that as a kid, you know, someone
Totally.
who kind of looks like you, who, you know, is a hero. I don't know, something to look up to.
Mm-hmm. And then at one point he like sat down and he was like, and you know, I'm proud of the two of you. And like, you could just like, they started bawling. It was great. It was great. That and I've just been obsessing over the Wheel of Time stuff because there's just been so much casting news coming out that it's been.
Saw Leandrin, and we saw a bunch of unnamed characters were released.
One of who I think is Suan. Gosh, I think is Suan and Leanne. I combine them into one name.
Suan. Luan.
And then there's another sort of bearded dude who could be almost anybody of the minor male characters.
Yeah, that's why I kind of stay away from the speculation, because I'm like, oh, come on, guys. It could be literally anyone. Why try to guess randomly? Also, pretty soon they're just going to tell you, so...
Right. Well, and with some of them context, like, I do think that you can predict that, like, they announced these 4 women at once. 3 of them, and we know they're all Aes Sedai. We know they're all in Faldara. And some of them have very specific physical traits. It's like one of these things where we're like, we can narrow it down to this point, but arguing whether, like, oh, one of them's going to be Varen versus Suan versus, like, you know, we'll find out. But I'm excited to see the actors and the quality of the actors they keep announcing. Like, more and more and more high tier, high quality, accomplished, awarded actors.
Not no names.
But aren't, like, big names, yeah.
And we do know, like, if they're releasing, like, headshots and stuff, then these are going to be important characters. Like, they're not just going to be a side. Otherwise, they wouldn't bother with the social media hype.
We've got a good chance of this show being given every resource possible to make it its best possible version of itself. And so, like, on that level, I cannot be disappointed with what comes out. Because it's like, I know that, like, whatever inherent difficulties they have to write around and work around and film around, those are inherent in the books themselves. And I don't think that there's any better time, place, or world in which this show could come out. I'm still going to be disappointed with it because it's not going to be exactly what I picture in my head.
Oh yeah,
but,
that's that's going to happen too.
So like there's there's two levels. There's like the curve I'm grading it against is like the possible spectrum of what the show could be. The curve that I want it to be is the world bends all of its resources towards creating the greatest Wheel of Time show ever. The more information I get, the more enthusiastic I get, which is a good trend.
They do seem to be doing a really good job, and
there are still many make or break things that we do not know yet. CGI being the biggest one for me at this point.
I know. My wanting to stay away from speculation and stuff is not because I'm not excited, guys. It's just because I know I don't know, and nobody will until things start to happen. And I guess I like steer myself clear of like there's so much to be revealed. Like you just said, Seth, the CGI stuff. Like how are they going to do channeling? Like what about Ogier singing? Like how much Ogier will there be? We know that Loyal's going to be in the show, so likely some. There's just so much.
Hundreds of hours about this thing, How are they going to fit even a fraction of what's in the books in even like
right.
hundreds of hours of TV show? Like it's
Our podcast as it stands will definitely be way longer than any show that could ever be
the sum
made.
of the TV show. Oh yeah. Absolutely. Now, we're certainly a lower information, lower bandwidth type of thing, right? You're hearing just one set of words in your ear at a time, whereas a TV show is always going to be visual. It's always going to supply more dialogue, more characters. But at the same time, there's so much. They have to pick and choose. They can't put it all on screen.
Neil is bringing up a really good point when he says, basically, would you prefer them to ruin it because it's unlikely to remotely live up the books in order to make what appeal to the masses as a TV show? And like, yeah, I totally get that. It can't be the books. A show can't ever be the books,
And I don't think a show can ruin the books. The books exist aside from the show.
I guess the biggest stakes in my emotions about it are that I worry that, I guess, I want people to be able to get something out of the story in some way comparable to the way that I did. I guess I really want people to love it. People who are unfamiliar already with the books, who come to it because of the show. I just want that to make a good impression and maybe draw people to actually do some reading, which is something I like to mention that I feel good about. If we get anyone to read a little bit more, it doesn't even matter what it is. We've made the world a slightly better place. Read a book. Yeah.
That was my biggest disappointment with the Shannara Chronicles, is no one having watched that show would ever go, oh, maybe I should check out those books.
Yeah. If you love the TV show, you go pick up the books. Like, there's so much more to it. That's usually the appeal,
But Shannara never had any of that. Like, it was so bad.
I've only watched clips, but I've had so many people just tell me that it was awful, so I never tried it.
So here's something that's a little more on the border. Dune. That original movie that a lot of people claim didn't do a great job of providing Dune. But, I still feel it was true to the books, even if it didn't do a great job. Is that something that you'd want? That's like, maybe not great, but it's at least true to the story and does drive some people in that direction.
Yeah, there's some aspects to that. Like, wasn't like David Bowie in the original Dune movie? Like, I feel like even stuff like that. Oh, okay, it was Sting, but still, having some big names in there will draw people to it. And if people enjoy the story even a little, or get learn some lesson, or I don't know, just generally enjoy it, then it might bring people toward the books rather than away. And even if that just means having some cool acting that's not necessarily like 100% true to the books, I don't even really care about that, I wouldn't say.
I'm kind of in it for the merch, I'll be honest.
I want a damn t-shirt.
I want better Wheel of Time merch, damn it.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or
support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?